You didn't find this video. It found you, not as a coincidence, not as content, but as a signal. Some part of you quiet, ancient, has already heard what's about to be spoken. Not with ears, not with thought, but with a memory that isn't stored in the mind. You weren't meant to learn something new today. You were meant to remember, because this message isn't for everyone. It won't resonate with noise. It won't impress the mind that craves proof. But if you feel it even slightly, you're not outside the field anymore. You're in it. So let's begin. Not with questions like, how do I manifest? Or, what is the secret formula? Instead, ask yourself this: when did I start to forget what I already knew? Because if something inside you is stirring right now, if your breath has slowed, if your body is leaning in, it's not because you're discovering something new. It's because the code is remembering you. They told you the world was outside of you. That life happens to you, that you're a product of your upbringing, your environment, your past. They taught you to cope, to adapt, to hustle harder, and you did with everything you had. But deep inside, something never aligned. You looked around and wondered why things kept repeating. Why, despite your effort, you still felt like you were running in circles. Different faces, same patterns. Different years, same fears. No one ever told you that maybe, just maybe, the world you were trying to change was only a mirror. That the real origin of reality isn't out there, it's in your field. Thousands of years ago, long before the modern world carved truth into categories and beliefs, the ancients spoke of a law. They didn't write it in textbooks. They whispered it through symbols and geometry and breath. They called it the law of mentalism, and at the center of it stood Thoth, not as a god, but as the keeper of resonance. Not many remember this, but Thoth never promised miracles. He never offered blessings. He offered something far more powerful, a map to the inner world, the one you forgot you were shaping all along. Your field, your vibrational essence, is the real architect of what you see. Thoughts don't just float, they echo. Feelings don't just pass, they program. And reality? It doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you are beneath the words, beneath the smile, beneath the part of you trying so hard to hold it together. This is why so many affirmations fall flat. Why even when you beg the universe to change, things often stay the same. Because the universe isn't listening to your requests. It's reading your frequency. And your frequency is shaped not by willpower, but by presence. So if you've been exhausted, if you've tried everything and nothing stuck, maybe it's not because you failed. Maybe it's because you've been solving a mirror from the outside. But you can't fix a reflection by wiping the glass. You fix it by turning inward. Thoth's message was never about belief. It was about attunement. He knew, you don't shift reality by effort. You shift it by returning to the truth of who you are. Not the person shaped by fear, but the being who existed before the fear. Reality is not something you're stuck inside. It's something responding to you in every moment, with precision, with neutrality, with care. When you realize this, the game changes. You don't need to force the world to love you. You just need to remember the field you've been carrying all along. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you're here now. Because something inside you has begun to stir. Not a thought, not a feeling, a frequency. And once it starts to rise, everything begins. You've probably heard the name before, Thoth. Maybe in the dusty pages of an ancient myth, or whispered across esoteric texts. Maybe as a god of writing, a scribe of wisdom, a figure cloaked in bird form and mystery. But that's only the story the world told you. The one you could wrap into a paragraph, point to in a museum, reduce to a statue. That's not who he is. Thoth was never a god. He was, and still is, a frequency. Not something you worship, something you remember. Long before empires were carved into stone, long before language solidified thought into cages, there was something subtler moving through time. A rhythm, a resonance. And every time humanity got close to forgetting what it truly was, he would return not with thunder, not with fire, but as a quiet current pulsing beneath reality. Sometimes through a symbol, sometimes through a voice you can't explain, sometimes through a dream that won't let go. That's the thing. Thoth doesn't enter a room. He enters a soul, and not all at once. He doesn't speak in commands. He hums. He waits. He lets your own longing become the call. People have looked for him in temples, in books, in lost cities buried beneath the sand. But those were never the true coordinates, because he's not found through seeking, he's revealed through remembering. And remembering doesn't come from the mind. It comes from somewhere deeper, a place inside you that feels like it's been waiting forever to hear something it already knows. That's his message. Not doctrine, not dogma, but activation. He doesn't teach, he reminds. He doesn't demand, he resonates. He doesn't stand above you. He meets you where your silence begins. Every time you feel that sense of, I've heard this before, even though no one's ever said it to you, that's him. That's the part of you still tuned to a higher signal. That's the pulse that never left, even when the world got loud. When you enter that space, when your mind stills and your soul begins to speak in feelings instead of thoughts, you don't summon Thoth, you match him. And in that moment, the veil doesn't just fall, it dissolves. Because you're no longer looking for the light. There are books you open with your hands, and then there are books that open you. The teachings of Thoth were never made of paper or ink. They were not written to be analyzed, debated, or quoted. They were encoded quietly in vibration, not meant to be understood, meant to be felt. You don't read them with your eyes. You receive them with your field. It's why so many scroll past this kind of message, because to the mind that needs facts, proof, structure, it looks like nothing, but to the soul that's been aching in silence, it feels like everything. Each phrase, each symbol, each silence between words in these teachings, they aren't information. They're invitations, seeds waiting in the soil of your being. Not everyone will hear them, not because they're unworthy, but because they're not yet tuned. You are. You didn't find this because you were curious. You found it because something inside you has already said yes. Before your mind could catch up, your frequency already answered. That's how these teachings work. They don't travel through thought. They travel through recognition. You're not being taught anything new. You're uncovering what was never truly forgotten, only buried. Your soul didn't lose the knowledge. It just went quiet, waiting for the signal to rise again. That's why Thoth never built a religion. Why his wisdom didn't survive in temples, but in symbols and murmurs. A map you carry inside your own energy field. You don't need to be initiated. You are the initiation. You don't need a translator. Your nervous system is already decoding. You don't need permission. If you're resonating with these words, you've already been chosen by the field itself. Because the real sacred text, it's not in some vault beneath the pyramids. It's you. Your mind is the codex. Your body is the page. Your vibration is the language. And when the resonance is right, the book begins to read you. You've been told to dream big, to speak it into existence, to visualize, to declare, to repeat your affirmations like spells. But you've also noticed something. It doesn't always work. And deep down, you've wondered why. It's not because you're broken. It's not because the universe is ignoring you. It's because no matter how loudly you speak, reality doesn't respond to words. It responds to frequency. And frequency isn't what you say. It's what you are consistently, quietly, beneath the noise. The sum of your memories, emotions, beliefs, and unconscious patterns, all of it, pulsing through your field like a broadcast. You're not failing to manifest. You're already manifesting, all the time. That job that drains you, that relationship that repeats the same loop, that emotion that sits in your chest like a stone, none of it is random. It's a perfect match to the signals your energy is sending. This is the forbidden truth. You've been taught that reality is something you navigate, but in truth, reality is something you generate. And you've been doing it your entire life, mostly by accident. So the question is no longer, can I manifest? The real question is, what have I been manifesting without realizing it? And more importantly, what would shift if I became conscious of my broadcast? The field, what some call God, or source, or universe, is not personal. It doesn't reward goodness or punish confusion. It simply reflects resonance. If your energy says, I don't feel worthy, the field answers with more scenarios to confirm it. If your vibration whispers, I must do more to prove myself, life gives you loops of endless striving. But if, one morning, your frequency begins to hum something different, something truer, even quietly, I am already enough, I am safe to receive, I am not my past, then slowly, steadily, the mirror begins to change. This is not magic, it's physics of the soul. Thoth understood this long before it had a name. He didn't offer techniques to get more. He offered insight to become different, not externally, but energetically. Because when your frequency stabilizes, so does your life. Not because you force the world to shift, but because you stop sending mixed signals. So now, maybe it's time to stop shouting into the void, hoping something hears you, and start listening to the tone of your own being. Because it's always been transmitting, and reality, it's been listening perfectly the whole time. There's a moment quiet, irreversible, when you realize you haven't been reacting to reality. You've been writing it, not with your hands, not with your words, but with your consciousness. And once that truth lands, even gently, you can't unknow it. It's the first law of hermetic wisdom, the root beneath all the others. The all is mind, not as a philosophy, not as poetic suggestion, but as structure, as blueprint, as law. This law, mentalism, doesn't mean your thoughts influence things. It means reality itself is an extension of thought. Your thoughts are not floating, harmless ripples. They are building blocks forming the lattice of experience around you, not in some vague spiritual way, but in the most literal sense. What you think becomes what you feel. What you feel becomes what you expect. What you expect becomes what you act on. And what you act on becomes your life. But most of this happens beneath awareness. That's the part no one told you. You've been carrying internal codes, old beliefs, inherited fears, unresolved stories, broadcasting them into the field, like software you didn't know was running. And then you wondered why the world responded the way it did. You weren't wrong. You were just unconscious. Thoth understood this, not as a mystic, but as an architect of energy. He taught that thought was not private, it was formative. Every idea you cling to about yourself, about what's possible, about what you're allowed to want, becomes a vibrational command. Not because the universe is testing you, but because it obeys structure. This is the part that frees and frightens people the most. Because if your thoughts have shaped the prison, then they can also open the door. But freedom comes with clarity. And clarity asks for responsibility. The question isn't just, what am I thinking? It's, what patterns of thought have I allowed to become law in my field? Are they yours? Were they planted? Did you choose them? Or did they choose you when you were too young to say no? This is not a call to blame yourself. This is a call to wake up, to recognize that every moment, you are either authoring your field or defaulting to a script you didn't write. And the shift? It doesn't require perfection, only presence. When you begin to notice the thought before it becomes form, you begin to re-enter the throne of creation. That's not spiritual poetry. That's the law. And whether you believe it or not, it's already in motion. You've done the work. You've journaled, visualized, affirmed. You've spoken your intentions out loud, lit the candles, followed the steps, and still something doesn't land. It's like your life hovers in a holding pattern, and you don't know why. It's okay. You're not broken. You're not doing it wrong. You're just tuning into a deeper layer of the truth, because manifestation isn't about doing more. It's about being aligned, and alignment doesn't come from the surface, it rises from the core. Most people try to manifest with their conscious minds. They picture what they want, they say the right things, but the universe doesn't respond to words. It responds to signal, and signal is shaped by your subconscious. If, deep down, you carry the belief, I'm not worthy, I have to work harder than others, good things don't last for me, that becomes the tone of your transmission. Even if your conscious voice says otherwise, the field is listening to the part of you that's still afraid. This is where many spiritual teachings skip over the nuance. They tell you to think positively, but they don't show you how to untangle the quiet pain beneath the smile. They tell you to focus on what you want, but they ignore the part of you that doesn't believe you can have it. And so you end up exhausted, pushing harder, blaming yourself, trying to override your nervous system with mantras. But Thoth, and the hermetic wisdom he guarded, never asked you to pretend. It asks you to reveal, to turn inward with honesty, not shame, to find the old frequencies you absorbed from parents, teachers, culture, and decide whether you still want to carry them. Because here's the truth. The only reason you haven't manifested what you seek is because there's still a part of you that doesn't believe it's safe to receive it. That part is not your enemy. It's not sabotage. It's a protective mechanism, built in a moment when you needed survival more than expansion. But now, you're ready to evolve. And to do that, you don't need to fight your patterns. You need to witness them with compassion and shift the signal. What you think you need is more effort. What you really need is more coherence. So before you ask for more from the universe, ask yourself, what am I still unconsciously broadcasting? And is it time to change the station? The moment you do not perfectly, but honestly, your field begins to reorganize. Because when you stop trying to manifest from fear and start vibrating from truth, you don't have to chase alignment. You become it. Some things don't need translation. They bypass the mind, slip beneath the words, and land somewhere in your chest before you even know what they mean. A spiral carved into stone, an eye inside a triangle, a number that keeps showing up in strange places. You notice it, and something stirs. Not thought, something else. Recognition. That's because symbols are not just designs. They are vibrational codes, alive, ancient, and when your field is ready, they begin to speak. You don't have to understand the Eye of Horus, the number 7, or the sacred triangle in order for them to work on you. These aren't puzzles to be solved, they're signals to be received. Thoth knew this. He didn't write teachings, he encoded them. He placed them in geometry, in proportion, in patterns that show up not just in Egypt, but in Peru, in Sumeria, in Tibet, in crop circles and cathedral ceilings, as if consciousness left breadcrumbs across time. Because it did. The reason these same symbols appear across civilizations that never met, across centuries that never touched, is because they were never cultural. They were universal. They weren't passed down by hand. They were remembered through vibration. Your soul knows the shape of truth. It feels when something is in resonance. And these symbols? They don't explain. They activate. They invite your frequency to shift, to stretch beyond your logical mind, beyond the noise of modern thought, and into alignment with something primordial. So when you see one of them and feel something flicker inside, don't dismiss it. That's the field knocking. It's not about worshipping symbols. It's about recognizing them as part of your own design. Just as DNA carries genetic memory, these archetypes carry energetic memory. Memory that predates this body, this life, this moment. That's why the eye watches you, not with threat, but with invitation. That's why the triangle shows up in dreams. Why numbers repeat when you're on the edge of breakthrough? Because the language of vibration is trying to re-enter your field. So don't just look at symbols. Feel them. Sit with them. Let them work on you. Like a tuning fork hums through the bones. You are not here to decode them. You are here to remember with them. Because when your resonance meets theirs, something unlocks. Not a thought, not an answer, a shift. And once it begins, you don't see the world the same way again, because now the codes are speaking. And finally, you're listening. You've heard the word manifestation. So many times it's lost its weight. So many promises, so many shortcuts. Just believe, just speak it, just raise your vibe. But Thoth never spoke of magic as something accidental. He spoke of it as attunement. And attunement requires rhythm, repetition, presence. Because co-creation isn't something that happens when the stars align or your energy is perfect. It's a practice, a lived frequency, a way of showing up to yourself again and again until what you desire and who you are become the same. Not in theory, in vibration. There's a reason the ancients breathed in patterns, why they wrote prayers not as requests, but as harmonies, why they repeated movements, chants, visualizations, not for superstition, but for calibration. Because repetition rewires, and stillness reveals. You don't need a temple to do this. You don't need incense, or mantras, or moonlight. You need awareness, consistency, a willingness to meet your inner field like a sacred space even in the most ordinary of moments. It begins in silence, with a single breath you choose to feel, with a thought you watch without flinching, with a truth you write before you filter it. When you breathe intentionally, you signal to your nervous system that you are safe. When you journal your frequency, you begin to see your pattern instead of being it. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, you stop building reality from reaction. These are not trendy practices. They are ancient protocols, invisible rituals, and over time, they build something more powerful than spells. They build alignment, because the universe doesn't reward effort. It reflects coherence. When your actions, emotions, and intentions hum in the same tone, the field listens, and it responds, not like lightning, more like gravity, soft, certain, unstoppable. You don't need to perform spiritual rituals. You become one. Every breath becomes a recalibration. Every morning becomes a doorway. Every choice becomes a vote for the frequency you want to live in. So ask yourself, not what do I need to do today, but what would it feel like to be in resonance, and let that do the work. Because practice isn't about perfection, it's about permission. And the moment you let yourself settle into that rhythm, you're not chasing manifestation anymore. You are the portal, and life begins to flow through you. There is a shift, subtle but unmistakable, when you no longer feel like a mind inside a body, but a field behind the form. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens when the edges of thought begin to blur, when your breath slows not as a technique, but as a remembering, when silence no longer feels empty, it feels charged. And in that space, something sacred clicks into place. You're not thinking about reality, you're shaping it. This is not ego, this is not control, this is conscious participation in the very intelligence that builds stars, folds DNA, and stirs intuition into motion. You are not inside the universe, looking out. You are within the same field that dreamed it into being. And when your awareness aligns with that, you stop asking the universe to fix your life. You begin listening for how it wants to move through you. This is the moment Thoth was pointing to all along. Not worship, not waiting, but embodiment. You stop chasing purpose and start becoming it. You realize that the great works of love, healing, invention, compassion, they weren't random. They were born through people who became still enough to hear the field speak, and brave enough to answer. That's the real sacred power, not to manifest trinkets, but to serve as a vessel, so that what's highest in you can shape what's around you. You've felt it before, in moments when time slowed, when your words landed deeper than you expected, when you said yes to something that felt bigger than you but truer than anything else. That's when your consciousness wasn't just witnessing reality, it was co-authoring it. You don't need to be perfect to live this way. You don't need credentials or signs. You just need willingness, a gentle yes, to becoming more than a consumer of light, a bearer of it. Because from this space, the universe stops feeling distant. It feels conversational. Ideas show up when you're ready to hold them. People cross your path with timing too precise to be planned. The right words come not because you thought of them, but because something deeper spoke through you. This is the field recognizing itself. In you, through you, as you. And the more you allow it, the more life responds. Not as reward, but as reflection. Because you are no longer trying to control the creation. You have joined it. You were never just a seeker. You were the seed. This wisdom, it didn't find you. It remembers you, because you are not just learning this truth. You are this truth, returning to itself. You are not a student of the code. You are the living code, a line in the sacred pattern, a thread in the tapestry of awakening. The universe did not send you here to be impressed. It called you to embody. The veil has fallen not as a spectacle, but as a summons. Now is not the time to consume more knowledge. Now is the time to become it. Breathe it, walk it, speak only what echoes from the deep. Live like your frequency is medicine, because it is. You are the memory the universe has been waiting to recall. So, step through.